Hi, it's Pastor Steve, and we're continuing our study going through the Bible cover to cover. And today is January 13, and we're starting at Genesis 36. But this section actually divides a number of books in the Bible that pretty much have these genealogies. Now, today's reading is the kind of reading that when you're going through the Bible, you're like, oh my goodness, why are these genealogies here? Now, there's a simple truth when it comes to genealogies. The genealogies in the Bible are there for a defining purpose. They're helping you know how a particular people came to be. Or they give us a background of a formation of a country that will one day be interacting with Israel. Now, in this case, the primary level of this genealogy relates to Esau's descendants, which become the people of Edom. Now, Edom means red, and if you remember, Esau was a very red child, very red man. And I want to show you on a map here that this is the country that is of Edom, and here is the Dead Sea, and this says the kingdom of Judah. You may not be able to see it well on your resolution, but over here is the Mediterranean Sea. And why this is so important is because when the people of Israel end up in Egypt for 400 years becoming slaves, eventually they're going to make their way over on this side of the Dead Sea and into the Promised Land. But they're going to have to pass through Edom, and there's going to be problems. There's going to be tension. And what this genealogy sets us up for is where this country ended up in its origins. Now, here's the other principle with genealogies. These genealogies eventually just fall off. In other words, they're not followed up anywhere unless it pertains ultimately to King David, his descendants, and ultimately Jesus the Messiah. That is where these genealogies just keep going on because that's the one that's really important from our perspective. Now, beyond that, you look at these genealogies, there are some interesting things. For example, you'll see a different list of wives' names for Esau earlier in the book of Genesis. In this genealogy, we have Adah, Oholibamah, and Basemath. And Basemath, by the way, means perfume, and it turned out to be a very common name. But the earlier names are different. So here are the possibilities. Esau married 3 other women, or these are different names for the same women. At the end of the day, we don't know. And so this was not a passage that kind of inspires us. I've often heard people say, this tells us that God is a God who's organized. Well, I suppose it does. But ultimately, the reason these genealogies are here, it's all part of telling the story that will ultimately take us to Jesus the Messiah. But till then, we see the list of names, our eyes blur, and here and there we catch little interesting things because it's not just a genealogy. There is some narrative section. But on the bright side, if you don't like genealogies, we get to move on. And next day, tomorrow, we're going to be beginning a very interesting adventure pertaining to Joseph. I hope you have a great day.